Hey everybody, I'm Paul, one of the pastors here. I'm so glad that you're with us as we continue our series, Because. And Justin, who has been a part of our team for this last year doing a church planting residency, is getting ready to launch Restore Church in Mona Shores Middle School in the new year. And Justin, in the middle of all of this, was trying to figure out, like you have to when you're starting a church, like who's in and who's out, and finances and resources, and it can be overwhelming. I remember those days as a new church planter when we launched the journey and just thinking like, I need everything and I have nothing. And you just need a lifeline. You need some hope. You need to know like God is in it somehow. Well, one of those days of kind of pressure for Justin came in late August of this year. And it was about the time that we did baptisms at the beach, where we gathered both of our locations down at Lake Michigan and did baptisms. On that Sunday, one of our Journey family, came up to Justin's son, Davis, and gave him a wad of cash. There was, I think, some ones or fives on the outside, as Justin remembered it. And Davis put it in his pocket and, went home at the end of the day with his family. And he's like, oh yeah, Dad, somebody gave me some money to give to you for the church. Justin took the wad of cash, he opened it up, and he began to count it. $713. And he was overwhelmed. He was so, it was so meaningful to him. Like in that moment of, God, how are you going to provide? And God did in an unexpected way. And he was so grateful. Not only so grateful to be a part of that, but so grateful that his son got to be a part of it for what for them was a miracle. When I was getting ready to write this message, I texted him like, hey, like how much was that gift for? And it was like 2 seconds later, like $713. Like he'll never forget that. My guess is he'll tell that story for years to come. We had a journeyer recently who was going through an issue with a job situation. Then they had 2 major house repair issues. And they just kind of mentioned it kind of off the cuff, but it was something that was weighing on them. I mean, it's just hard, when you're dealing with a bunch of different issues and they all come at the same time. Well, we heard about that and we sent them, saying the Journey sent a letter and a note just to encourage them, let them know that we're praying for them, encourage them, support them. And we put in there this little check. We can't do very much, but we can do something. We can help. We can be an encouragement. Well, they got one of the projects where they got the equipment that they needed for the home project. They got all that purchased and figured out. Then they had to have it installed. And on the day that it was installed, they got everything installed, and they asked how much the labor was, the final bill, and he said it's $300 even. As they got that news, like, okay, we'll figure that out. He's packing up his stuff, and as I understand it, they went out to the mailbox. They got their mail, and in it was a note from the Journey to encourage them. And as they opened it up and opened up the check was for, you guessed it, exactly $300. We were told that, and as they told us that, there was emotion there of just like God provided, He took care of us, He met our need, like so thankful. Listen, both of those situations, there were unexpected gifts that brought hope and encouragement to those who needed it. And it showed God's faithfulness. We're in this series because, and in it we're looking at kind of the why questions of why we do what we do, of where we've been and where we're going as a church. And over the last several weeks, we've been talking how we're all called to be part of the cause, right? We're all called to be part of the cause. We all have a part to play. Last week we said that we're called to be everyday inviters. We're called to be everyday inviters. That we all have friends and neighbors and coworkers and family that we just know, like if they could experience God's love and grace, it could change everything for them. And here's the good news. God is already at work in their lives, and He just simply invites us to partner with Him in sharing hope with those around us. And so we talked about how we need to pray for opportunities and listen to people's stories, to share our story, and to be willing to share God's story as well. We're called to be everyday inviters. Now today, we're talking about another thing that we're called to be. If we're going to be part of the cause, here's another step we want to encourage you to take. We want you to be a hope giver. To be a hope giver. Doesn't it feel like people are in desperate need of hope today? Struggling, discouraged, defeated. And would you believe that God wants you and I to be hope givers in the lives of other people? Like he chooses to use you and I to be hope givers. And honestly, this is in some respects what this whole series has been about. All of these different ways that we're called to be hope givers because every person matters, because people are far from God, because there is such a deep need. We're called to play our part, and we're called to be hope givers. But today I want to talk about one specific way that we can be hope givers. And it's kind of centered around a mantra that we've used at The Journey for years, that God is the blesser who blesses us to be a blessing. God's the blesser who blesses us to be a blessing. And man, you all have done that through the years in so many different ways. Well, today, we're going to look in 2 Corinthians. 2 Corinthians is a book in the New Testament of the Bible. It's actually a letter that Paul wrote to the church at Corinth. But where we're picking it up, he's actually talking to the church at Corinth about some other churches called the Macedonian churches. And they were churches in places like Philippi and Thessalonica. So when you read the New Testament of the Bible, you'll notice that there's letters to the Philippians and letters to the Thessalonians. These are the churches that he's talking about, these Macedonian churches. So in 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 1, he says this, "And now, brothers and sisters, we want you to know about the grace that God has given the Macedonian churches." Man, that sounds good, doesn't it? Like he's telling the Corinthians, hey, I want to tell you about the grace that God has given the Macedonian churches. And you're like, awesome. Like, let's celebrate the good news of what's happening there. Oh, that sounds encouraging. Then the very next verse, he says this, "In the midst of a very severe trial." Well, that doesn't sound very encouraging at all, does it? Like, in the midst of a very severe trial, their overflowing joy and their extreme poverty welled up in rich generosity. What? Like, I feel like we could spend the whole morning right there on that one verse. Like, this is not how you think it's going to go when you read verse 1. Like, hey, I want to tell you about the grace that the Macedonian churches are experiencing. And then he starts out with, hey, they're facing very severe trials. The wording for very severe trials, one commentator said, it's like he was saying, they're being crushed by life. Have you ever felt that way? Like you're being crushed by life? That's how they were feeling. They're being crushed by life, and yet they had this overflowing joy. How does that happen? Like, I want some of that, right? When I'm being crushed by life, I don't think very often I'm overflowing with joy. But this was their story. They're overflowing with joy. And then it says, not only are they overflowing with joy, in the midst of very severe trial, they're overflowing joy, and their extreme poverty welled up in rich generosity. That's crazy, right? That word for extreme there, we don't even have an English equivalent, but if we did, like the closest we could get is like a submarine. So what they're saying is their extreme poverty, like they're to the depths of the ocean floor poverty, like the deepest and lowest poverty you can get. This is what they were living in. They're facing very severe trials. They have like the lowest of the low when it comes to poverty. And yet there was an overflowing joy that welled up in rich generosity. This is like a Common Core math equation, isn't it? Like crushed by life plus overflowing joy plus extreme poverty equals rich generosity. Like this doesn't even make sense. They were literally one of the poorest people, and yet with joy they chose to be generous, and not even just generous, richly generous, as they gave to the Jerusalem church, which, by the way, the Jerusalem church was better off than they were. They had needs, but not needs like the Macedonian churches had. In 2019, we took a team of 23 people to Santa Rosa, Peru. And we went to the Compassion Center, which we helped to build. And we sponsor 175 to 200 children there. And we got to be there with the people in Santa Rosa, Peru. It's a little fishing village of like 5,000 people. And many of our team got to meet their sponsored children in their homes. It is extreme poverty. Every single child sponsored through Compassion, their family has to make $2 a day or less. We walked into homes that didn't have running water, that had dirt on the floors. It was it was a struggle to see what was going on there and the poverty that they face day in and day out. Yet they were so thankful and grateful that we were there. Well, one of the things that we did while we were there is they had a church service. At that church service, probably 300 or so people from the community packed into the church because we were there. And we celebrated together and we worshiped together. And at one point, Pastor Segundo, the pastor, presented us with this boat. It is a traditional fishing boat. Santa Rosa is a fishing community. That's the largest industry there. And he gave us this boat. And when he gave us this boat and handed it to us, there were literal gasps and oohs and ahs that came from the congregation. And then clapping. Like you could tell this was a meaningful and extravagant gift that they gave. They were facing severe trials, extreme poverty, but they had an overflowing joy at even just being together with us and their overflowing joy in Jesus, and it welled up in rich generosity. This boat will always remind me of that moment in Peru and of 2 Corinthians chapter 8. Well, it goes on, it says this in verse 3, "For I testify that they gave as much as they were able, and even beyond their ability, entirely on their own. They urgently pleaded with us for the privilege of sharing in the service of the Lord's people." They weren't being foolish. They were eager to be hope givers for others because of what God had done in their life. Again, they weren't being foolish. They were just like, man, God has done so much in our life. I want to be able to give to others. I want to make a difference in others. I want others to experience the same thing that I've experienced. Giving was a joy, even in the middle of their current situation. Giving is more a matter of the heart than it is of our circumstances. Everything about their circumstances said, now is not the time. Even Paul, I think, in those verses was kind of like, hey, we didn't ask them. It says entirely on their own. Like, we weren't going to ask them for money because, man, we knew like they're facing extreme hardship. And yet they begged him to be able to give. That's incredible. Then in verse 5, it says this, "And they exceeded our expectations. They gave themselves first of all to the Lord, and then by the will of God also to us." Isn't that interesting? Like, what happened first? First, they gave themselves to God. They didn't give their money first. They gave themselves to God first. And when they trusted him as the provider, as the protector, they lived with open hands. When we live like our lives are not our own, we won't live like our possessions are either. Giving in that way, that kind of generosity, is more a matter of the heart than it is of our circumstances. The Macedonians, they were trusting God that he was the blesser who was going to bless them to be a blessing, that he would take care of them and provide for them and protect them, that they could trust him, and so they could live open-handed. Generosity isn't born out of wealth. And they didn't have tons to give, but they were generous with what they did have. They lived out what Jesus talked about in Luke chapter 16, verse 10, when Jesus says this, "Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much, and whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much." It's not the size of the gift, but the faithfulness of the person to trust him, to live open-handed, to be willing to give what we do have, trusting him to take it and bless it and use it and multiply it. And when that's our attitude and response, like, why would God dry that up? Like, when we're willing to live open-handed, why would God go like, oh, well, I gave you a little bit and you got rid of it and no more, right? I think God will use you to continue to bless others if you live open-handed. God calls us to be hope givers, to be generous, and to trust him as our provider. And part of that is with our money. And I think it's because it's tangible, because it's right there, because it's so hard to do. Like, God doesn't need your money, but he wants your heart. He wants your trust. And I think one of the best indicators is our dollars, is our wallet, is our purse. So I've got 10 ones here. This represents our money. 10% each, right? So there's 100% of our money. And here's how we tend to treat our money. We tend to treat it like, I earned it, I worked for it, I got it, it's my money. And then God says, I want you to bring back the first part. That's kind of a biblical principle. Bring back the first part to me, so that you don't start thinking you're God, so that you don't start thinking that it's all dependent on you. He says, I want you to just bring back one to me. But when we say it's my money, I got it, I earned it, and then God says, give me one, it feels like a loss, right? It feels like he's taking something from us. But instead, we're supposed to see our money like this. Like here we are, right? And God has all of the resources that we need. And God says, here, I'm going to give to you. Now bring back one to me so that you trust me, so you see me as your provider. Like I've given you it all, I'm asking for you to then give one back. When we see it that way, it almost seems silly that we wouldn't be willing to do that, especially because, God is the one who owns everything. When I think about my own resources, I go to like empty pockets, right? Like I need his provision for me. And he has all the resources at his disposal. When we launched the journey in 2003, we had on our launch Sunday 275 people. It was amazing. And within about 8 weeks, we grew it to 70 people. It was the wrong direction. Well, listen, we grew it to 70 people, and we had a unique opportunity kind of in those moments. We were about 3 or 4 months in. And one of the things they would say to never do as a new church is never do a financial campaign. Like that is a death nail for a new church. But we had an opportunity. A Christian businessman who we knew, he was building some space out, and he said, hey, I've got some space for you. You can build it kind of the way that you want it. I'll give you a graduated rent. It was an amazing deal. But we needed about $40,000 to do finishing costs. So we went to our little congregation of about 70, 80 people. We said, hey, this is the opportunity in front of us. We have to make a decision soon. We're going to need about $40,000. And people were generous. And I remember those days. Honestly, we were raising our own support. We had no salary, no insurance. We were raising our own support. We had 3 young kids at home. Jennifer was staying at home. And we gave beyond our ability, as others did too. And they were generous, and they painted, and they pounded nails, and they built staging. And many of you found a relationship with Jesus, in part because of their generosity in helping to create spaces for you to encounter God. Right? They were blessed to be a blessing. They saw God as the blesser. They lived open-handed, and they were a blessing, maybe even to you. Isn't that amazing? And as we head into the next season as a church, this collaboration of churches, we're asking you to do the same for those who will come after you, for the family and friends and coworkers, for the kids and teens within our church who will be the next generation. We're asking you to partner together with us and to be that blessing to those who will come next, to be hope givers for others to experience the same thing that you've experienced. Every year we do what we call our Hope Christmas Project, and this year we're doing that, but we're doing it as part of this Because campaign, and we're doing it in a bigger and better way. And so here's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be looking to bless our global partners as we do each and every year. And you're going to be hearing about those in the weeks ahead. One of those is our partners in Santa Rosa, Peru. We're going to be helping these sponsored children get the supplies and things they need. And we're going to be giving some money to help unsponsored children be able to be a part of the Compassion Center. The reality is it's taking longer to sponsor kids in a post-pandemic world. But these kids are ready and in need of help. And so they've asked us, would we partner with them to help get kids sponsored until they can find full-time kind of sponsorship. And we'll have opportunities to sponsor kids in the future as well. These kids have desperate need right now, and we can help. We're also going to be partnering with Converge Caribbean. Last year, we helped put a roof on for a church in Haiti. And this year, we're going to be helping sponsor a Haitian pastor living in the Dominican Republic. A lot of Haitians have moved to the Dominican just to be able to live, to find a job. But Haitians are considered second-class citizens in the Dominican. So we have a Haitian pastor and family that has started this church. They're going to need support. We can support them and encourage them. And our hope is that long-term we'll be able to take trips to the Dominican to support that church in more significant ways as well. But we want to support them. It will be a major miracle and blessing for that family. We're also going to continue to partner with Verve Church in Las Vegas. For over a decade now, we've partnered with them as they care and make a difference in the lives of people who work on the Strip, who live off the Strip. It is a hard area in Sin City. And we want to bless them so that they can continue to outreach and make a difference in their community. We're also going to be helping Restore Church, this new church in Mona Shores Middle School. We want to help them launch well, and so we want to give them a gift to be able to bless them. And we're looking to help Northside location. And Northside has been a part of our Journey family, but over this next year, they'll become their own autonomous church. And we want to make sure that they have an emergency fund that they can fall back on, that they have some funds to be able to set them up for success in the future. And we want to be able to financially kind of stabilize things here at the Journey. As we've talked about, we're running below numbers, and so we need to stabilize things here for the good of your family, so that we can continue to do ministry, effective ministry here for years and years to come, for the sake of our kids and grandkids, that they'll have a place where they can encounter Jesus, so that they can grow up in and they can see God work in and through them. So, doing all of that, we're asking you to pray and consider how you could be part of the cause, how we could live with rich generosity and be a blessing to those around us. You know, we all have a part to play, and because everyone matters, we will be hope givers, and we'll play a part in rich generosity to accomplish all that God has for us. So usually with the Hope Christmas Project, we take about 5 to 6 weeks, and we ask you to give like a one-time gift above and beyond your normal giving. This year, we're doing things differently. We're going bigger and better. And so we're asking that we will kind of be able to get all of these funds in between the 1st of December and the end of November 2023. So we're really doing a one-year project. And here's how you can play a part. First, we're asking you to consider an initial one-time gift to help our global partners. When we get some initial gifts in, it allows us to get the money to them faster because the needs are now. Secondly, we want to encourage you to look at giving either for the first time if you've never given, or to increase your current normal giving by $19.99 per week. $19.99 per week. Well, you can round up to 20 if you want, but $19.99, right? It sounds like, hey, and we'll also give you some Ginsu knives, which we're not going to do, right? But it sounds like one of those commercials. And wait, there's more. We're asking you to give $19.99 per week, or to increase $19.99 per week. If we all did that together, we could meet all the needs that we just talked about by giving $19.99 per week. Maybe that's increasing from zero. You just haven't given yet. You haven't jumped in yet. Now's the time. We're actually looking to add 20 new givers who say, like, okay, I'm going to be a part of this. Maybe that's increasing what you're already giving. That's what our family did. And maybe that's what you're going to do and take a step that way. We're looking for each of our recurring givers to consider your next step in your generosity journey. Now, maybe you already did that when we talked about finances earlier this fall. And if you did, thank you so much for your giving and kind of forward thinking in that. Some, you can't do $19.99 per week, but others could do more. And when we each play our part, whether from wealth or from generosity or poverty, from wealth or poverty, we can impact others and do all that God has for us. So would you pray and consider what you could do and participate at whatever level you can. Together, we can meet these needs. Together, we can be a blessing to those around us. We can be hope givers. And make no mistake, when it comes to our neighbors and friends and coworkers, when it comes to the people that Restore Church will meet, that Northside will meet, that will meet, when it comes to the children in Santa Rosa, Peru, to the Haitians in the Dominican, to those in Sin City, it'll be a miracle for them. It can bring hope and life to those in need. So let's be hope givers. Let's be hope givers. As you're watching online today, if you go to our website, thejourneyscc.com, you're going to see a Because button. And all the information and details for this project are there, including how you can give online. And we would love for you to participate in that way. We're looking to have a commitment Sunday by November 20. That'll let us know where we stand and how we can proceed with this project. And if you're brand new, you're just checking things out, you might be like going, I don't know, man, I'm not sure I even know these people, if I trust them, and I get it. But listen, here's what I want to encourage you. Everything that we talked about really applies no matter what. Be generous somewhere. Be generous somewhere. If you don't trust us yet, be generous somewhere. Now, our hope is that you come to love and trust the journey and jump in. But until then, be generous somewhere. God is the blesser who's blessed us to be a blessing. And we need to live open-handed with that, to trust him. And as we trust him, we can experience his blessing in our lives, even as we bless others. He invites you to be a hope giver. And for all of you who are part of the journey, would you be part of the cause? If we all play our part, doing what we can do, we can make an impact and a difference bigger than we could imagine. Would you be a hope giver? Let's pray together. God, thank you that you love us, that even in the middle of challenges and difficulties, that we can have an overflowing joy that can well up into rich generosity because you are trustworthy, you are a provider. And so, God, we can trust you and live open-handed, that you're the blesser, we're the blessed to be a blessing. So God, as we ponder, as we pray, as we think about the role that we can play in all of this, God, would you speak to us? Would you help us to take increasing steps of faith and trust? And would you use what we give to bring hope to others? In Jesus' name, amen.